Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Community Leadership Overview on Scrutiny Committee. Special welcome to our guests, Dr. Emily Murray, University of Essex. Nice to see you again, Emily. Mike Cowan, Assistant Director of Sport, Culture and Health, and Leanne Thornton, Community Safety Manager. And a portfolio holder in the audience, Councillor Placey. Nice to see you, Jean. And online, Anthony Scrafton. And obviously our supporting officers for tonight. So we go to item 1, which is apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies for absence from Councillors Thompson and Doyle with no substitutions appointed. Thanks.
Thank you. Item 2, which is minutes of the last meeting, 29th of July. Is it okay if everybody in agreement, I sign those as a true record? Okay. Remind everybody, declarations of interests as and when pecuniary interest or personal interest and the nature of it in relation to any item on the agenda. Item 4, questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received none.
Thank you. We're going to change the agenda slightly. I'm going to go to item 6 to begin with, because Leanne, on the community safety, will make some comments on familiarity, violence, and also victim service and reports. Over to you, Leanne.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me this evening. I've come to discuss and speak about a final report that was submitted from the subcommittee or the Task and Finish group of the Familial Violence Task and Finish group. We did send a final report in. That Task and Finish group reached a natural conclusion once we submitted the final report. There was a list of recommendations in that report, and I can confirm that 5 out of the 7 of the recommendations have been completed. There's just 2 to continue with. One is around LGR and devolution. Well, obviously that can't be completed until that is completed itself, so we can't finish that action. And there's one other that I need to discuss with some staff internally about some training options. But everything else in that Task and Finish group has been completed. I think it's down to you to decide whether you want to continue with that Task and Finish group, or you want to complete that Task and Finish group and start a new Task and Finish group around victim support services, or give a steer as to how you would like us to take that forward.
Yeah, okay. Tonight, so obviously we'll have a discussion, and then we'll come back to you with how we're going to handle it.
Sure. Leanne, have you got any information on services for victims and support? It might be useful just to hear that just at this point.
Yep, so in preparation for this evening, I undertook some research around what support services were available for not just victims of crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour, but victims of all types of other situations as well. So I didn't do the research solely on victim support services. I'd done it on support services available in tendering right across the piece. So I found 27 different support services that would be available for us to look into if that's what you wanted us to do. And I have got a document where I downloaded all of the information. So it's entirely up to you whichever way you want to go, but there are 27 options for support services in the tendering area. whether you want to go into them in more detail, that's entirely up to you.
Bill, obviously we've got to put people forward for inclusion on those task and finish groups, and then we'll get some questions together for Leanne to be able to move on with the task and finish.
Chairman, just if the committee did set up a task and finish group, then the victims' services and support for those victims of familial violence could also be looked at as part of that task and finish group, couldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that could be part of the findings, to look into some of those statistics around that. They're very difficult to find, as we found out in the task and finish group. So we would need to do further research into that particular area, because they are quite difficult to find, those statistics. But also, if you do go down the road of looking at victim support services, other partners in the Community Safety Partnership would be able to contribute as well. So it wouldn't just be, from a council's perspective, we could ask other partners from the partnership to contribute to the session as well.
Okay, then we'll put some recommendations to you, and then we'll look forward to working with you and carrying on the good work which we've had in the past year. So thanks very much for all your hard work and your department's hard work.
I think Leanne's going to go now. If that's okay with you.
I realise you had a very hard day, and you're quite welcome to stay. But if you'd like to take a leave, that'll be fine. And thanks very much. Thanks very much for coming. Thanks. Just like to welcome Dawn Williams, who has joined us online. So welcome, Dawn, and
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll come into the conversation as it progresses. If you'd like to give us your presentation. I must say this is the second time you've come back, so you're a glutton for punishment. But I think I speak for the whole committee here, and it was very informative, the session we did with you last time. So we're looking to push on as well. So over to you.
Can you hear me? Thank you for having me back again. I should say, I'm going to speak about work we've been doing with young people in coastal communities and mental health, but it's about national level data. It's not specifically to tendering, so I want to make that clear. But I think a lot of what we've been finding can be applied to tendering, and to think about, I think at the end I was going to say, does this look like familiar to you, and how we can move forward. So I just wanted to make that clear to begin with. And I was just going to give a short, this is the normal academic thing we do, background. So my background is actually looking at geographic inequalities in health, and trying to think about the effects of where people live on their health and well-being. And I specifically got interested in coastal communities from Chris Whitty's report in 2021. So it's a really seminal report showing that some of the worst health and well-being outcomes in England are in specific coastal communities. And it was showing that it's across a whole swath of disease and outcomes, not just one thing. So it was really pinpointing that, what's going on here. And some saying, well, it's likely, a lot of it due to aging populations, so retirement communities. The older you get, the more likely you have illness and disease. But then it was showing some of the highest prevalence of diseases were in places where the population was relatively young. So it was really pointing out there's something going on here, we need to look into it. And then specifically about mental health, I look at geography, so I like maps. So it's basically trying to figure out the prevalence of adult mental health in England. So red is higher prevalence of poor mental health, and blue is better. And if you just kind of look at that, you can see that some of the worst mental health is in kind of deprived cities, but also some specifically around a lot of the coastal areas of England. But this is adult mental health. There's actually no data on youth mental health at a small geography like this available nationally. And so we had this paper that I talked about the last time I was here, looking at residents in coastal communities and adolescents and health. And this is being able to use this really great longitudinal data. So it's looking across 12 years of data, looking at where people lived when they were teenagers, whether that was coastal or inland, and then following them up over 12 years to look at the development of ill health. So it's not just some kind of correlation, they just happened to live there at that time and poor health. So it's really kind of showing that it's causal, something's going on to cause disease. And the thing that came out of this is that it wasn't really about physical health so much for teenagers, it was about mental health. It was a really strong indicator. And we were saying, well, why? Why should that be? Why? There's lots of research showing that living in a coastal community, being by the coast, being, you know, by blue space is what we call it, is really good for your health. And I've experienced that, you know. You feel better when you're by the sea, lots of well-being. So why should it be that young people are having worse mental health? So that's what we were looking at. And so the message there was saying, it's not all coastal communities, it's just the top 20% most deprived. And it was specifically, so not all coastal communities, only in the most deprived ones. So this is the data set that we used, Understanding Society. So it's a national data set. So it's sampled to be representative of all parts of the UK. And we said, you know, there is a specific survey of young people aged 10 to 15. So young people all over the UK. And we said, do they live in a coastal community or not? Which actually is a bit difficult to define in some ways, but it's basically how far away the residence is from the coastline, and follow them up over 12 years. And the specific measurements that we were using is about mental functioning. So 6 different questions saying, over the last 4 weeks, you know, was your different ways of measuring mental functioning, and they put this together in a score. And then they also look at psychological distress. So not just a kind of well-being, how are you feeling today, but you are distressed in some sort of way. And so from the first paper, this is what it was showing. So this is predicted mental functioning in adulthood by coastal community type. And the score on the left there is mental functioning, so higher is better. And across the bottom here is area deprivation. So 5 is the most deprived areas. And what you can see is basically for 1, 2, and 3, the lines between the coastal is the jagged one, and inland is together. You can see they aren't really different for the coastal and inland in the mental functioning. The bars cross each other. But as you get out to the most deprived areas, you get this widening in mental functioning. So what this essentially is saying is that young people in coastal deprived areas have much worse mental functioning than inland deprived areas. So saying even when you're in the top 20 most deprived areas, the coastal areas, young people are having worse mental health. And this was quite surprising to all of us, because usually we would say that the explanation for the mental health gap would be because of deprivation. But instead it's saying actually even in the most deprived there's a mental health gap. And you know, why would that be? And it's quite a large gap as well. It's almost a 4-point difference in mental functioning. It's quite a huge gap. So I can keep going, but I just wanted to make sure is that, yeah, okay. And so the next question for me was saying, okay, we see this difference. What's going on here? What's the potential explanations? Is this something about the environment? Is it something about the place? You know, something about being on the coast? Um, or is it something about the clustering of the people that live in these places? And specifically around, is this about poverty? Is this about economic challenges in these deprived coastal communities? And then we also asked about mental health services. I'm sure you know all about this, but I was trying to explain this to people who don't know a lot about English coastal towns, and talking about there's a base, you know, talking about that a lot of coastal towns had much more thriving industry, talking about declines of industries, seaside fishing, shipbuilding, etc., and saying over time, and some of these places has been economic decline. Um, and I'm sure I don't have to explain here. So, and we tend to get young people who are healthier leaving, other people moving in that might be not as healthy. Um, so really saying is the hypothesis that it's not just about the place, but it's also about the movement of people between the places. And so we tried to start to think, so if it's something about the environment, what could it be? Is it about the economic environment? So is it about unemployment? Is it about economic inactivity, productivity? Is it about, we're calling social environment? So for young people, do they have other young people, the other people around them who have qualifications, other people around them that have occupations that they can learn from? Is it about crime? Is it about the educational environment? Or is it about the built environment? So we have journey times to GPs, to hospitals. Can they get to the nearest employment center? Can they get to a job center? Yeah. And so we just tried to think like, what are the different explanations for this? And so we linked this data to the understanding society data. So for each person in that data set, each young person, we knew all of this about the environment. And basically what happens is, did a very crude comparison of saying those that lived in a coastal area and those that lived in an inland area. And on average, the coastal environments are worse off for all of these measures than the inland areas for the economic, social, and educational. The built environment, not so much. I mean, so there's a red arrow, it's saying it's on average worse. So coastal inland comparison, so very, I say, categorical comparison. The good news being that in coastal areas there's more green space and there's less air pollution, which has been shown to be related to mental health, so we can take that off. Yeah. And even when, so this is even saying, even when you look within the top 20% most deprived coastal areas, the coastal top deprived areas in England, the coastal areas are on average worse on a lot of these measures than the inland areas. So economic inactivity, so this is saying in the top 20% most deprived areas, there's more economically active people in the coastal areas than inland, a little bit more crime, but the really huge difference was about educational differences. So access to higher education was just one of them. So in the most deprived areas, about 22% of young people go into higher education, whereas inland deprived areas, it was upwards 40%. So really stark differences. But as I said, a little bit better. Particulate matter is air pollution from cars. But when we started to look at whether this was related to young people's mental health, only two of these really stood out. and it was about the mean levels of crime, which has been shown to be really strongly related to mental health of residents, and it was about access to higher education. So that was quite surprising to say, and this was after you adjust for a lot of the things about people themselves, about their household income, their tenure, so whether they live in private renting, that kind of thing. So really, only these two things about the environment were related to young people's mental health. But as I said, we were really trying to explain that mental health gap between the most deprived coastal youth and the most deprived inland youth. And that's that difference there of about 5 points. And we were saying, so then we adjust for the individual socioeconomic qualities, so the household income, the tenure, what happens to that difference? And it actually just moves a bit to almost 4 points. So it's explaining some of that difference. When you add in crime, it actually goes the other way, so it's not an explanation. When you add in local access to higher education, it explains a tiny bit. When you put them all together, it goes up to about 4. So what this says to me is it's saying the biggest explanation so far is more about the personal socioeconomic qualities of the people living in these areas rather than the environment. But this is just looking at where these young people were living during adolescence and what their household income and private renting was like. So in summary, saying young adults residing in the most deprived coastal areas of England during adolescence rate their mental health lower than they have lived in equally deprived areas inland. And the primary explanation so far is the economic and social challenges that people face in these communities, particularly household incomes and private renting. Did I show? Yeah. I don't know. Is there questions about that? But I think it was also showing that we still have a lot that we haven't explained yet. So we're going to continue to look at what other explanations are going on here. But I think the main message to me that's coming out of this is that kind of, even when you look at within the most deprived areas, the coastal areas have higher levels of poverty, more people in poverty and much higher levels. And that is definitely related to mental health. So that seems to be the big message coming out of the research. And then we also started to look at mental health services. And we had Claire Wicks, who's a postdoctoral fellow with us at the Institute, has led on this paper looking at risk of diagnosed and undiagnosed mental distress using the same data set. And basically what she's done is she said, we're going to look at psychological distress, and people self-report in this survey how psychologically distressed they are or not. And then we could also look at, have they been diagnosed with a mental health condition? So we could look at the gap between, they're indicating in the survey that they're distressed, but they had not been diagnosed. And this covers very recent survey data. So they actually survey the same households every other year. And so this covers like a 4-year period between 2018 and 2023, so quite recent. And basically, the headline information here is showing that if you're comparing coastal areas, how many of them have been diagnosed with a mental health, have not been diagnosed with a mental health condition, even though they indicated that they were distressed. Those young people in the top 20% most deprived coastal communities are more than 3 times more likely to not have been diagnosed with a mental health condition, if they had one, indicated that they were distressed, than their peers inland. And it was the opposite. So that's looking at young adults 16 to 24. and working adults and older adults. And actually, if you looked at older adults, it was the reverse. So the older adults in the deprived coastal communities were more likely to be diagnosed if they had indicated distress than their peers inland. So it was the opposite. So this was saying to us that there's something going on with young people in deprived coastal communities where they are more likely to be distressed. So we showed that before. And when they are distressed, they're not being diagnosed for some reason. Don't know why, what's going on. Yeah, and that was just a figure showing the same thing, etc. Yeah, so it seems, so to us it's like a double whammy of they're more distressed and they're not being diagnosed for some reason. But I did want to say, so I have some, this is the last couple of slides, some colleagues at UCL who we've been doing a research project together where they've been going and interviewing stakeholders, so I would call this room stakeholders as well, and young people in coastal communities around England, and talking to them about their aspirations for themselves and their aspirations for their towns. And a lot of what has come out of that, I think one of the sites was Great Yarmouth, I think Barrow, Whitehaven, Torquay, and then there's a couple more. And what the young people and I would say stakeholders have said there is it seems like a lot of young people in these coastal areas, if I summed it up, said there's not a lot to do, there's nowhere to go that is safe. So they were saying, you know, youth hubs have been taken away, funding taken away from those, that the public spaces are for tourists and not for us. These are the sentiments. This is what the young people are saying. I'm just repeating what they've been saying. So just a general feeling like there's nowhere for us to connect with other young people socially. So we stay at home on the computer and do it online. And so these were the recommendations from the report, and I think I said the link to this report. I'm not sure. As well, to say about offering young people something to do and somewhere to go, providing funding for youth services, including young people in decision making, and more employment educational opportunities and regeneration. But I know you guys are already doing a lot of that, etc. Yeah, and I'll stop there. I sent around a policy briefing that we've created to kind of summarize the research in non-academic speak and making recommendations to both national and local policymakers. So I'd also sent the policy brief to a lot of coastal MPs and ICBs and others that I thought would be interested in the research, including here. So I was really glad that you responded and wanted to hear more about the presentation. But I think there's also been a lot of interest nationally. So I think like the APPG for coastal communities, Department of Health and Social Care, etc. So I'll stop there and really happy to answer any questions. But I think I'd also like to hear from you as well, your thoughts about the research too. Yeah.
Thanks for that. And I think I think the comments we made last time we saw you bring out these issues and problems, which sometimes it's difficult to take on board, to be honest with you. But I think what you are bringing it into the public arena, if you like. So well done for that. I'd just like to ask Anthony Scrafton. Anthony, are you? No, sorry, it's Anthony. He's online. Anthony. Sorry. Is he still online? Scrafton, yeah. Or has he gone? Yeah. What about Dawn? Dawn, are you? Oh, Dawn. Yeah. Rebecca.
Hi there, sorry, Dawn has had to take a call.
Oh, okay. Okay, then. I wondered whether you'd like to come in on the presentation Emily has just given us, and what is in your remit, and is there sort of anything you would like to add to that or bring to our attention?
Yeah, so within North East Essex, within HCRG Care Group services, we deliver a plethora of different services which are responsible for delivering early intervention from real early emotional health outcomes, and some of that is about identification of need and supporting children and young people and families to get to the right service. So there'll be some signposting or providing short interventions to support them. And then we have other services. We jointly deliver CAMS with North East London Foundation Trust. So that is across the Colchester and tendering areas. Another part of our service, which we do deliver within North East Essex, is the early intervention service. So that's for children aged 10 to 15. We are seeing children who are emotional based school avoidance. We call that, children and young people who aren't able to engage with education due to their emotional health. So we provide support for them, children and young people as well. There certainly are services there. I think what we hear from some of our service users is that ability to navigate the system, which feels quite a complex system to them. And families have a lot of systemic pressures going on that sometimes that can be quite difficult. I see from the agenda you've put in the websites for the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service there, which has all the links into the additional services. It's a shame Anthony's not here. He's part of the mental health in schools teams with North East London Foundation Trust. But equally, to understand how much work is being around this agenda, you'll be able to access that through them web platforms that are on the agenda there.
So is Anthony still online? Yeah. I think he's gone. He's gone. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So yeah. What we'll do, we'll go to questions then from the members. Anne, were you? And Anne and then Chris.
I'm probably of an age actually where I'm asking myself why. I've actually just come away from a youth club tonight which I set up. I've got over 300. I was there this evening from 5 to 6:15 with 40 young people. They love it, absolutely love it. And you're saying earlier on about we don't have these youth clubs now. No, we don't. We don't have after school activities. When my children were growing up, there was always something after school. There was always something there on a Saturday morning. I've lived in Coastal all my life. I was born in Coastal and I've lived here around this area for over 50 years. I've not experienced any of these major problems that we have today with my young people growing up. No, we weren't wealthy. We were a family. We sat down together at night having our meal. We offloaded our day. And some of these young people that come to us, and we have an older group from 11 to 15-year-olds, they come, they're safe, they want to offload, they want to chat, they want to see their pals. And yes, they want to see things happening. And they say, why haven't we got this? We've got a multi-purpose pitch hopefully coming in Walton. We had a skate day on Saturday. We had over 200 people there, 200 youngsters, all meeting their mates, all shelling out. And I think some of these areas, we can talk about statistics, we can talk about families and everything else, but I do think a lot of the problems is the after school times when they've got nowhere to go. And I do think that we do fail on that and the youth clubs that we don't seem to have today. Thank you.
Chris, Councillor Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Meyer, I read your report with interest. Is there a correlation between the provision of special educational needs education in coastal communities among deprived areas with mental health? Because one of the issues that sort of I'm aware of here is that if you have sometimes a child who is special educational needs dependent, it's not always that easy to be able to access or get them into the, shall we say, the relevant school. Very often they finish up being homeschooled. And that obviously, if you're sitting there on your own with a dog or whatever, and you tutor online, doesn't help your mental health, doesn't help your social interaction. So have you looked at the provision of special educational needs amongst the coastal communities, and especially those within more deprived areas?
No, I have not with this data, but that is a very good idea. I want to say, so this is national level data, so it's not saying anything that it's Essex specific.
No, I wasn't actually looking at Essex. I was more looking at your national educational levels, because obviously special educational needs are not just, shall we say, an issue in Essex, but would be an issue all over the country. And it would strike me that if you're on a coastal community, especially if you're in a smaller coastal community, it may not always be that easy to access the help that you need or get your child into the school that they need. So I was just wondering if, as part of your study, you'd looked at what the educational provision was and what impact that had within that specialised community. Bearing in mind that obviously if you come from wealthy families or the wealthier economic levels, you're usually getting a tutor or find some way of getting around the situation, where that option may not be open to low income families.
I haven't yet, but I'm putting it on the list. Thank you.
Yeah, Drew.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Fascinating. It raises more questions for me than answers, but that might be the point of it. It might be a good thing. But just looking at higher education, those young people in those kind of coastal communities would have had access to good primaries, good secondary schools, and yet it seems to be a break between where they go next. And I wonder whether those schools, in whatever measure is used, are the issues in those kind of starter schools before higher education, or is it like transport? But you know, those coastal schools, we've got no reason to believe will be any weaker than schools not on the coast. So it's baffling as to why an inspired child at those schools wouldn't go on to higher education unless it's transport, finances, and those issues.
So I have some colleagues who've been looking into this with the birth cohort data, so the ones that follow young people nationally from birth. And they definitely, and then you could look at people who are in their 30s or in 40s now, and you definitely see that young people in similar story in deprived coastal communities are much less likely to obtain a degree later in life. But then I think the explanation is, again, I think about the average household incomes in the area. So I think some of it is explained by, again, by the level of poverty and the level of income in the area, rather than the quality or of the schools themselves. So I think that's the story that's coming out very strongly, that it's much more an issue of supporting children out of poverty and supporting families in raising incomes and employment than something particular around the quality of the schools.
I think Anthony has come back. Okay, any other questions for? No. Did you want to bring something up on the social media?
I have another question, but it's probably for Rebecca, if that's all right. Is Rebecca still with? No, gone? Okay. Emily, I'll fire this at you, and you might be able to help with this one. So we've got a really, what looks like to be a really good list of places of support that people could go to. The question is, how quickly can you access that support? Because I know CAMS, for example, which is a good test of adult and child mental health support in Suffolk, has a waiting list on average of 12 to 18 months. So obviously it's a long wait to get that first and very important support. Does that exist kind of in coastal communities, where there might be an impressive list of support services, but actually it takes an awful long time to access them, or they're so full that it becomes irrelevant after a while?
I think the issue here is, I think waiting lists for chems is long, everywhere in the country. I think it's whether is it longer here than it is in other places. That I don't know. So I should have said at the end of the presentation is that we've actually, at the university, the Institute of Public Health and Wellbeing has gotten quite a big grant from NIHR to look at young people's mental health in Essex specifically. And so it's just started in September. I think we're having a launch event in a couple of weeks. So I think that's a really good opportunity to then move from this national level data to really come down. But I think what we don't want to do is step in, because I think lots of people are doing lots of really great things, as we heard from Rebecca. And so I think the beginning bit is going to be talking to everyone and really assessing what's going on, and then thinking about how we can add that to that and help with gaps. But I think the whole point of the funding is that they realize that a lot of the mental health research funding basically goes to London and it goes to Cambridge, and it really doesn't go anywhere outside of the country. So I think this is a really good opportunity to be able to get some really good research about mental health in Essex. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, is he there? I'm not quite sure if he's actually logged in, is he?
Yeah.
Hi, Anthony. Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Oh.
My is awful.
Oh, hi. How are you?
Yeah, good.
Thanks for persevering. Obviously, Emily's done a presentation. We wondered whether there was correlation with yourselves. You the lead of mental health support teams. So we'd like to hear your thoughts on the issues.
Yeah, I guess in terms of our sort of viewpoint across Essex, I guess what does it mean for schools in terms of supporting children and families that they are picking up a lot more than they are historically normally doing in that sense. So I guess my question for Emily would be, is how would that correlate with schools?
Did you get that?
Sorry, could you say that again? Rephrase what's the question exactly?
The question would be, it's how would that correlate for schools in terms of your research, in terms of the coastal stuff? How would that correlate for schools in those areas?
So we were looking at different things about the school environment. So we're looking at the average test scores and the average progression to higher education, and that was test scores and progress to higher education are lower in coastal areas than inland on average, but that didn't seem to be related to young people's mental health after you adjusted for household incomes and that kind of stuff.
Sorry, my internet signal was really bad. So say that again.
It didn't seem to be the explanation for that mental health gap. The school environment did not. It seemed to be much more about crime levels and the progress to higher education rather than school test scores specifically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Well, oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, Annie. Is there anything else you want to add on to that? Hi, Anthony. He's still there. Yeah.
If you're trying to talk, Anthony, then you're on mute.
Oh, apologies. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying on that. Is there anything you want to add?
No,
from
that's
your
fine.
from your perspective?
No, no,
No.
it's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for that. Then. So, are there any other questions for for our guests? No. Well, actually, fact, Mr. Karen, you're going to be next on the agenda. So, is it something do you want to add? Sorry, do you want to ask something a bit specifically, or cover it in your bit?
No, thanks, Chair. I was really just going to provide some level of sort of context from the council's perspective, but I guess that could be the next agenda item. So I was probably jumping in a bit premature there.
Oh, okay. No. So okay then. Well, we'll move on to B, 5B on the A1, the report of the assistant. Yeah, sorry, mate. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Emily, and to Anthony. That was really fascinating, and I guess a lot of the research that you were talking about, because you made the point at the start that it is national data in the national context, but I think it probably resonated with all of us about what we see locally, and Councillor Oxley talked about some of the great work that goes on that she does in Walton. I'll pick up some other things shortly. But the report that was prepared was really just to provide some level of context about services that are available and a little bit of context about some of the local data and the challenges that are faced in tendering. And I guess it's almost apt this week that Councillor Placey is going to be presenting a new health and wellbeing strategy to Cabinet on Friday for their consideration for adoption, because when hopefully you get time to read through that, and particularly the delivery plan, there's lots of references to the challenges within mental health, and I guess the council's role in what in our limitations and place in that system, if you like, and what the council can do to impact on that, which is largely through the wider determinants of health and some of the points you were making around about economic activity and income per household and employment opportunities, housing and all those things, some of which we directly impact on and have opportunities to do positive things, not just in isolation, but more pertinently with partners throughout that system. And I think, in terms of the regeneration schemes that the council's embarking on at the moment, particularly in some of the deprived parts of our communities and some of the work that's going on there, some of the points that Councillor Oxley was making, and I would just want to add some of those, that within the sport and activity strategy that was adopted a few months ago, so it's not just about bringing young people and people of all age groups into to do something physically active, which I'm sure we'd all agree is a good thing. It's also about tackling social isolation, about bringing young people out of their houses, hopefully away from screens and blue screens and sitting in isolation in their rooms, and going to do something collectively with their peers, which, going back a few decades was just normality, and it's not normality anymore. Life has shifted and changed, and I don't think that's not necessarily just about data. It's about what we see with our own eyes in our own streets and in our own worlds. So the council has got a part to play there about how it can support young people in particular. And just a few practical things that are actually happening kind of now, which will be really interested to see how they unfold and how we can evaluate them. And I was actually speaking to one of Emily's colleagues this morning about potential evaluation for some of these things I'm going to mention. But the council has just done a grant scheme around after-school activities. So providing schools and clubs the opportunity to bid in for a small amount of money to go and do after-school activities anywhere in the district, and to do something positive for young people. So that's one thing. So we've had lots of applications, and hopefully some of those schemes will be really positive. It's not the council doing them, it's local volunteers, sports organisations, activity clubs and schools. And in addition to that, we've also provided a grant scheme for those young people who would like to continue to carry on and jump into that club, whatever it may be, because that's the whole reason of doing it that way. It's not just going in and doing some after-school activities and then they stop at the end of 3 months. It's about giving them opportunity to carry on and maybe join that club. And if they haven't got the financial wherewithal to do that, there's a small grant scheme available for either the school or the club or other agencies to apply for that young person to get some financial support. So I just thought I'd mention that because it was really pertinent to some of the things that we were discussing. And in addition to that, there's also a recognition that there is potentially a lack of high quality, free to use facilities around the district. And you mentioned, Emily, in your research around potentially a lack of things to do for young people in coastal communities. So just a few examples of things that are going on at the moment. So you may be aware that there's 4 new Football Foundation sponsored play zones. Councillor Oxley's been fundamental in the one that's being prepared for Walton, but there's also one for Jaywick Sands in Crossways there, one in Harwich / Dovercourt at Cliff Park, and also one in Clacton. So they're predominantly free to use facilities, certainly free at the point of use. Although they are multi-generational, they are, quite targeted at young people. And not just open the gates and let people flood in. It's about doing things that are quite targeted and about support. So, hopefully there's lots of things that we can do to tackle some of the challenges we've been talking about. And there's also, as part of one of the community regeneration partnership schemes, there's a big free-to-use facility at Clacton Leisure Centre with a new cycle facility, a couple of play areas for different age ranges, and other free-to-use facilities within that's being developed that will be hopefully opening within the next 18 months or so as part of that multi-million-pound scheme. So a really high-quality facility there. So I thought it was worth mentioning some of those things that are going on. Another thing I thought was really interesting, which I kind of only discovered a few months ago on a kind of different level, is I was speaking to the owner of a local visitor attraction. I won't name them, but they were talking about employing. They have employed support services to support young people with mental health problems when they employ them. So they're bringing people in who are young people coming into entry-level jobs, probably seasonal jobs, but seeing, I guess, to some degree, the commercial benefit of having a support service to support those young people with mental health challenges coming into the workplace. Massively important in our area, because some of those people, that's their first passage into any kind of employment, and we're in a position, and they're being in a position where they're being given some additional support about some of the mental health challenges that they've got, which hopefully will provide them with some level of stability and moving on into hopefully into a thriving career, which will help to tackle some of those things. The other thing I thought I'd just mention, because I think it's definitely worthy of doing that, is aspiration. It's something that we kind of talk about a lot within our range of service that we provide. I was speaking to a head teacher in Tendring not too long back, and they said the most challenging issue that they're faced with is a lack of aspiration from parents for their children. And when you think about that, that's a massive challenge, particularly when you're talking about those transferring into higher education and having that aspiration for kind of lifelong learning and skills and going on into different career paths as they're going forward. So trying to do interventions that support young people and their aspirations. And hopefully kind of finally through some of the significant interventions that are listed in their health and wellbeing strategy. And there's some really exciting grant schemes that Councillor Placey is trying to put in place with other members of the Cabinet in order to support external organisations, partners, to be able to apply for funding through a grant scheme that will come out through that strategy, which won't just be about physical activity, it'll be about health, creativity and culture and all those things that A, support aspiration, B, are engaging for young people and provide some level of something of entertainment in a collaborative and supportive environment rather than being isolated and potentially shut away in their rooms. Hopefully that's a good overview of the report. Councillor Seddy.
Anthony, are you still there? Hello?
Yes.
Hi. I don't know if you picked up on the mental health issues which Mike brought up there, and I don't know whether that would come under your remit or if there's a link up there somewhere.
There is, yes, definitely. So I work for the mental health support teams across Essex. So we've picked up the Northeast contract there. So in tendering in that stuff, happy to sort of link up outside of this meeting in that sense. Yeah.
He said to link up after this meeting, so I'll leave that with you, and then there might be some sort of joint working there. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Karen. The thing that struck me hugely about what you said was that the parents didn't have much aspiration for their children. Isn't that a piece of work that maybe should be picked up as sort of a priority? Because it doesn't matter what we put in place for the children, if they then go home and mum and dad go, oh, you don't want to do that, you want to do this, because I haven't had a problem with that, I didn't go to university, and look, I'm all right, Jack, kind of thing. I mean, I didn't go to university because of various reasons, and I wish I had. My parents didn't have huge aspiration for me because of their aspirations. I feel like sometimes that we focus on the children and what they can do, but if we don't focus on the parents, we're in a no-win situation, because it's great for us to support the children, to say, you can do this if you want to, but then they go home and there is no support or anything at home, then it peters out unless that child really is quite gun-ho and wants to do it despite what's being said at home. Is there sort of a focus on maybe having workshops for parents that say, look, it may feel really daunting that if you didn't have that level of opportunity when you were younger, what can we do to support you, to support your child, to have that aspiration to move from here to there? Is there a piece of work that's missing, perhaps? I don't know. I could be just talking gibberish, but it was just what struck me from a knowledge of young people kind of, and my own personal experience of not being encouraged to go to university, so I just got a job. I don't know. I don't know if any of that made any sense, but it did to me in my head.
Thank you. No, absolutely. Thanks, Councillor Ferguson. I think the important thing to say is that isn't necessarily something which the council would lead on in terms of our role as a community leader. I know that within the education system they do, I think primary schools do days where the children head off to university and they do, I can't remember how they badge them, but they certainly was nothing like that offered when I was in school. in the Victorian times. But certainly certainly that's something. They're kind of aspiration days which are organised. I mean I'd certainly take your point that it's obviously you know it's not a great position to be in where you have got a family unit where if parents don't have that level of aspiration for their children. But I do think in terms of the role that we can play, things like commissioning things about creativity and culture and sport and activity and a lot of the action plan that's in the emerging health and wellbeing strategy are centred and geared around providing opportunity for those young people to inspire them to do things and I do think personally and professionally that those types of interventions are what kind of what works and bringing young people into environments where they're with other young people like youth clubs and those types of organisations.
Most encouraging parents to come along as well, isn't it? You know, we try and encourage our parents to come along to all the things we do, have a chat and see what's what really, and they come through the door, oh, what's happening here, and just think, oh well, little Jimmy was really good tonight, and you know, it's encouraged them to see how well they're doing. And table tennis tonight, you know, how good they are at table tennis, and yes, there's something coming up. Can you get them there? Well, no, but we can help you, but you know, just come along and support. Is having that support, isn't it? Time and time again, that support. And every child wants that parent to support. You don't have loads of money, you don't have to have loads of things, but they just want a little, you know, encouragement. And that's not asking a lot. And that's one of the things that we really try and do.
Councillor Davidson.
Yeah, I can actually understand that. Myself, I run a play park and also children's football teams. And up until about 2 years ago, it was pretty feral, to be honest with you. But I started to involve the parents in everything, not just saying your parents come and watch your child play or come and watch it. I involved them in decision making and in what we think, what they think we're going to do. And it has worked for us extremely well. The children are better, they've got more to do. The parents are suggesting things. They're coming along and actually creating things themselves, which we would oversee. So I do see what Councillor Elsie is coming from, because we're on the same sort of level. Unfortunately, I haven't got a club because we haven't got a clubhouse, but we've got the same sort of thing. We have about 100 and odd children come through us a week. And we live in a deprived area, but it's absolutely essential, I believe, to get the parents, and it's hard, you know, to get parents involved. They're not the sort of people that want to get involved until you say you are being involved, you know, and they actually come along. It's really good. It's absolutely superb, to be honest with you. And that's really about what I say. I had a parent, before I came here, I had a parents' meeting tonight, just to kick about what I wanted to do and what I was going to say, you know, and involving them is the most important thing throughout everything. Whatever you do, you've got to involve people. You've got to involve them to get their backing on what your child does. And then their child then believes that if their parents find out about if they're going to be a little bit naughty, it does work. It works. I'm sure Councillor Oxley will say the same. It works. It does work. That's it, really.
Just very quickly, I'm say some of the things you've outlined, you know, very good. Have we looked at the parkour, like the free running trails? Have we ever looked at that?
Interestingly, I referred to a free-to-use facility that's part of the Community Regeneration Partnership set projects at Clacton Leisure Centre, and provisionally, I mean, there's a way to go on developing that project up to a level that it can go out to the market, but at the moment that is part of that project. So it would be instructor-led. It's not just people who crack on and do their thing, but there is potential for that to be included in that project. And there has been some programs at some of the sports facilities that we manage in order just to see how that works, and it was exceptionally popular with young people.
Anthony, if you're still there, is there any any parting words you've got?
Sorry, I forget the councillor that named it about involving the parents and stuff like that. It's over to your Ryan side. Absolutely, 100% in that sense. It's really important in terms of, like, you know, building the bridge between, you know, school, family, and that bridge. That's really important in that sense. I think, you know, in terms of our service, we are, you know, there's going to be 100% coverage in for MHSTs across Essex. And how we build that out is really important. But equally, at that point, it's about the community around the school. And, you know, have to look at the new, you know, Ofsted inspection report card, what looks at sort of well-being and what looks at, you know, the fundamentals of, you know, what they're looking for, which is going to be really interesting in that sense.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you very much for your input tonight, Anthony. Other questions for? Oh, sorry, Terry. Do you want to...
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I'm absolutely convinced that the councillors and officers know exactly our particular mental health needs in Tendring. I'm also convinced that we are doing really good work, whether that's the primary school health hubs, the new strategy, the play zones, and I'd just make a quick request that please don't forget the west of Tendring for those play zones in the future. My worry is that do our future partners in any unitary, whatever might emerge, know our worries in this area? And if they don't, how do we make sure they do so they're not forgotten for the future?
That's a really good question. I think the way that will pan itself out is through the Health and Wellbeing Alliance and the cross-border work that we do, particularly with our Colchester partners. We've worked really closely with them for a number of years now, and the work that's started with our colleagues in Braintree as well, in understanding, you know, their challenges and them understanding ours, if that's the way that the whole unitary process works out. But certainly there's quite a mature set of work going on that's been going on at Colchester for a number of years now, and using the Health Alliance as the backdrop for that. So I'm really confident that that would be the case, and the challenges that we've got here, they've got some as well in Greensted and the likes of.
Okay. Emily, would you like to have the last statement? Not to say maybe a strapline is probably the wrong description, but sort of something to escape. You know, it's been a first-class presentation, and we've had bits in from other people as well. So, what's your parting thoughts?
My passing thoughts is if you'd like to continue working on this with us, please do join us on the new research programme. I know Mike is coming to the lunch event on the 8th of October, but I think let's use this investment. It's about £2.5 million investment to really do some good locally together.
Yeah, I noticed, you know, that's a good point about working together, because obviously this is the second time you've been in front of us. But what we've also done, we've done a bit of work with Professor Nick Aldred. I don't know whether you're aware of him, Essex University.
Sorry, what was the name?
Professor Nick Aldred. And he's done a bit of work with environmental impact on anti-fouling, and obviously we're trying to make links with him as well. So all in all, I think it's I think there's might be joint working, collaboration. So thank you very much for coming
and
tonight.
if you want to speak more about this outside of the meeting, I'm very happy to.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for all their participation on that part of the meeting tonight. If we can just have a 5-minute recess, and then we'll come back just to talk over the work programme after that. Thank you. Ready? Yeah. Okay, now we go on to the recommendations from the presentations we've had this evening. Over to you, Mr. Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. I think it was your intention to collectively adopt the following recommendations: that you thank the various contributors to the meeting from the local health providers and the University of Essex, to note the research findings that nationally those young people in deprived coastal communities are significantly more prone to poor mental health and less likely to have that diagnosed when compared with the position of young people in comparable inland communities. And as a consequence of that, to urge that the evidence need is flagged with our partners as we progress over the coming years towards local government reorganisation. I think you also wanted to ask that the portfolio holder for partnerships take up the policy recommendations from the University of Essex Coastal Community Centre's research into coastal disadvantage and youth mental health, and to do so as part of the strategic approach to health and well-being locally. Those recommendations are on page 14 of the pack today, so I'm not going to reread those. And in addition to that, to seek to work, urge the portfolio holder to seek to work with the council's partners to promote measures to encourage greater aspiration for young people, including amongst their parents, and thereby address intergenerational low aspiration continuing. That you also would ask Cabinet to approve recommendation to government to provide for data collection and reporting to track health and well-being of young people in the UK, something that Dr. Emily Murray was saying isn't there and is a gap in monitoring this going forward. And finally, to record and welcome the offer for joint working with the University of Essex in respect of Essex-based youth mental health issues, and that be supported from across the council, including through this committee. We will need that to be proposed, seconded, and then voted on. So I've got that was proposed by Councillor Ferguson and seconded by Councillor Griffiths, and with the approval of the rest of the committee.
All okay?
That's it.
Good. Well done. Well done. Well done, everybody. Okay, now we're on to item number 6, which is the work programme from the Assistant Director, Corporate Policy and Support, which I believe is you, Mr. Simmons.
Thank you, Chairman. The report is before you, so I'm not going to take too long. The work programme at Appendix A is what was approved by full council, so it followed your recommendation. The recommendations monitoring is Appendix B, and just records the current position, and we'll seek to continue to update that as progress is made available to us. And Appendix C is the extract from the forthcoming decisions setting out matters which are in the purview of this committee. That's there. I just would then, I think, turn your attention to, I think, pages 26 and 27, more to do with those additional matters. So we need to appoint task and finish groups, such as you wish to have. I think there is still, as my understanding, an intention to have a joint working with parish and town councils task and finish group. In relation to youth provision for school-aged children outside of school, I think I'm right, but again, I would just like confirmation that the intention is to hold one last meeting of that group, and that will address primarily, I think, the online provision of information and how best to accommodate that. So that will come forward as a recommendation on that basis from that task and finish group, and that will be the conclusion of its work, which therefore leaves you with a thought as to what further work you might want to do. And having just heard from Dr. Murray and the local health providers, etc., of youth mental health issues, that might be something that a task and finish group might be value. There might be some value in establishing that, and so we can do that if that's your intention. In relation to the task and finish group on familial violence, I think you heard from Leanne Thornton earlier that most of the recommendations, progress is being made on those. It feels to me that that might be something that the committee could receive a report on, and therefore progress that through simply a meeting of this committee, which would mean that task and finish group would finish its work effectively. You wouldn't re-establish that. But potentially going and looking at victim services and victim support as a potential task and finish group. So if that's your intention, again, that would be helpful to hear. You have your report at Appendix D on the visit to Halterman and Carless oil refinery. You've heard from the chairman of the committee about his contacts with the University of Essex around the anti-fouling biocides, and I think that's probably going to involve a potential meeting down at Brightlingsea Harbour, just to examine that, to conclude that piece of work. And there is just a reference in there that your next meeting is scheduled, for October, and there's just a question mark in my mind that we will be in a position to report to you on the outcome of the first phase of consultation from the community governance review for Clacton, Holland and Jaywick.